Daisy Dell was the kind of town where the biggest excitement usually revolved around whether the county would resurface Main Street this year or next. A row of brick storefronts lined the thoroughfare, interspersed with flower boxes brimming with petunias. Old-timers rocked on their porches in the evenings, and a sense of neighborly calm kept the place humming along. On Market Street, just 2 blocks from the cozy cafe, stood the Maple Street Market, a small grocery store that sold everything from fresh fruit to homemade pies. It was inside those doors that Millie Harper spent her days at the checkout counter, scanning produce and greeting folks by name. Nothing truly unusual ever happened until Millie started noticing strange patterns in her customers' purchases. Millie had grown up in Daisy Dell, and in her 32 years she had never dreamed of living anywhere else. She'd inherited her mother's friendly smile, her father's inquisitive mind, and a talent for remembering faces. At Maple Street Market, she was known not only for being efficient, but also for noticing the little things, like when old Mr. Johnson had switched from whole milk to 2%, or when the newlywed Martins had started buying baby formula months before their official announcement. She was tuned in to Daisy Dell's habits, as small-town clerks often were, and that was precisely why a nagging suspicion began to grow. The first thing Millie had noticed was the odd combination of items. She couldn't figure out why 3 different customers, each from different parts of town, were routinely purchasing thick rubber gloves, cotton swabs, glass cleaning sprays, and small plastic containers. None of that seemed odd as a single purchase. Plenty of folks needed cleaning supplies. But these 3 customers never bought produce, never bought bread, never even swung by the bakery for pastries. Their baskets contained only items one might use to meticulously clean and store something fragile. They also invariably requested postage stamps, which Maple Street Market sold in sheets. Then they left quickly, as if in a rush. Over the course of a month, Millie had seen these patterns recur over and over, enough that she started keeping mental notes. She shared her suspicions with Ivy Coleman, one of her closest friends, and the store's assistant manager. Ivy had a touch of flair about her, wearing bright pink lipstick on even the most ordinary days, and she was no stranger to gossip. When Millie recounted the repeated purchases, especially the persistent requests for stamps, Ivy shrugged at first. "Maybe they just collect letters or postcards," she said. "Daisy Dell loves snail mail, after all," and even Ivy, who ordinarily brushed off quirky behaviors, found it odd that each customer specifically asked for the same brand of disinfectant wipes. They never varied their purchases. The repetitiveness was uncanny. Together, Millie and Ivy decided to keep track more systematically. They began scribbling down the names of the 3 repeat customers whenever they made their suspicious purchases. 2 were middle-aged men. Percy Dunbar, a quiet man who lived in a 1-bedroom rented cottage, and Walter Granger, who was rumoured to be a travelling salesman. The 3rd was a woman in her late 40s named Frances Frankie Myers, who taught at the local elementary school. Frankie had always seemed perfectly normal, the kind of person who'd wave at Millie across the street, smiling as she balanced a school bag stuffed with graded tests. Yet now Millie couldn't help wondering what Frankie was doing with those repeated cleaning supplies. With the strange purchase pattern lingering in her mind, Millie couldn't resist the tug of curiosity. One Saturday afternoon during her lunch break, she strolled down to Daisy Dell's lone coffee shop, the Cozy Cup, to meet her friend Penny, who worked as a librarian. "Penny," Millie began in a hushed tone, "do you happen to know anything about local clubs or groups that might be buying specialized cleaning supplies? Something like a workshop or a craft circle?" Penny, perched at the corner table with a spreadsheet of newly acquired books, raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "Not that I can think of," she said. "We've got the knitting circles, the gardening club and the historical society, but none of that screams odd cleaning routine." "Why do you ask?" Millie outlined her observations in detail, from the repeated purchases of latex gloves to the odd addition of stamps. As Penny sipped her tea, her habitual librarian's curiosity sparked. Maybe they share a hobby, or belong to some secret group? Stamps might suggest they're sending stuff out. Or it could be coin collecting, baseball cards, who knows? The mention of collectibles ignited Millie's imagination. She tried to recall any talk of a collectibles club in Daisy Dell, but came up short. Could it be that Percy, Walter, and Frankie were individually hoarding something? Or were they collaborating? The possibilities multiplied in her mind. She left the coffee shop more curious than ever. That evening, as Millie settled down on her back porch with a glass of iced tea, she decided to take a small, discreet step toward investigating. She had a decent relationship with Percy Dunbar, who occasionally walked past the store on his daily errands. Maybe if she casually asked him about a rumor involving some new collectible craze, he might spill the beans. The chance came sooner than expected. Monday morning, Percy walked into Maple Street Market, not long after it opened. The store was quiet, the only sounds being the distant hum of the ceiling fans and the rustling of paper bags. He walked over to the register with his usual set of items: 2 bottles of glass cleaner, a packet of cotton swabs, a fresh box of rubber gloves, and a sheet of stamps. Millie welcomed him warmly, scanning his purchases as casually as she could. "How are you doing today, Percy?" she asked, handing him his total. He fiddled with his wallet, avoiding eye contact. "I'm not too bad," he replied. A second of silence passed as Millie tried to muster a tactful question. Finally she ventured, "I heard people round town are collecting old coins, or baseball cards or something like that. Have you heard about it?" Percy paused, his eyes flicking upward, almost startled. "Can't say I have," he said quietly, placing his money on the counter. "I mostly keep to myself." She gave him a sweet smile. "Well, if you do know anything, let me know. I used to collect postcards myself years ago, and it'd be fun to join in." He returned a polite, nearly imperceptible smile. "Sure thing." And with that he left, the door's bell tinkling behind him. Once again he was brisk and elusive, confirming little. Meanwhile, Ivy's observations on Frankie Myers were leading nowhere concrete. Frankie still came in every week, always picking up the same items. She seemed pleasant enough, but any attempts by Ivy to chat about extracurricular hobbies were met with vague answers. "Oh, I'm too busy with school," or "I'm just tidying up around the house." As these patterns persisted and curiosity mounted, the two friends decided that a bigger step might be necessary. One Friday afternoon, while the store was bustling, Walter Granger showed up during the busiest hour. Ivy recognized him at checkout lane 3. He looked as harried as always, wearing the same rumpled jacket he'd worn last week. And yet he purchased the same repetitive set of items. Ivy motioned for Millie to join her after her shift. They waited until the store was nearly empty, then hurried outside to see if Walter was still around. They spotted his old truck rolling down Market Street, heading toward an out-of-the-ways neighborhood on the edge of town. In a stroke of boldness, they decided to follow him at a distance. Neither Millie nor Ivy had ever tailgated someone before, but their curiosity had gotten the better of them. They hopped into Millie's small sedan, trailing Walter's truck through the winding streets, past the public library, around 2 corners, and finally he turned down Pine Hollow Road, which was mostly residential. They slowed, attempting not to be noticed. When Walter pulled into a gravel driveway, they cruised past, glimpsing him step out of the truck with a grocery bag. He disappeared around the side of a small, unremarkable house. Millie's heart pounded with excitement. Ivy chewed her lip anxiously, though her eyes sparkled with curiosity. "We can't exactly knock on the door and ask him what he's doing," Ivy remarked. "But at least now we know where he's going." They circled back and parked discreetly a block away. For a moment, they considered taking a walk, hoping to observe something from the sidewalk. Yet the thought of being spotted peering into windows was too risky. Instead, they drove home, vowing to find another approach to solving the puzzle. That night, Millie lay awake, the small overhead fan clicking softly in her bedroom. She couldn't shake the feeling that something big, by Daisy Dell standards, was going on. The next morning, an idea struck. Donna Samuels, a chatty woman who volunteered at the Historical Society, was known to be well informed on all sorts of local matters. If a rare collectibles group existed, Donna might have heard rumours. After her shift, Millie made a beeline to the Historical Society's small brick building. She found Donna in a dimly lit alcove, arranging old photos of Daisy Dell's founding families. A smell of aging paper and polished wood hung in the air. "Donna," Millie began gently, "is hoping you might know of any local clubs that collect something unusual, antique stamps, coins, or figurines." Donna laughed, her voice echoing in the quiet hall. "Millie dear, if there were a big collecting group, I'd be all over it. Our society used to have a modest coin collection archived, but that's about it. Why so curious?" Feeling self-conscious, Millie explained, vaguely, that she'd met a few people who seemed interested in preserving items. "Oh," Donna said, tapping her chin. "I do recall hearing that some folks in town got hooked on a collectible card game, sort of a trading card mania, especially among a few grown adults. But it's hush-hush, as some folks think it's just for kids. I can't recall the name, though. Magical something or mystery something?" That set Millie's mind spinning. Trading cards, especially if they were rare, would certainly require pristine storage, continual use of cleaning supplies, gloves, protective containers. It fit. So maybe the mysterious trio from the store was collecting or dealing in rare trading cards. The stamps might be used to mail them out to other collectors. As soon as the idea latched on, it felt plausible. That evening, Millie invited Ivy, Penny, and even Donna to gather at her small house for an impromptu brainstorming session. They sipped sweet tea around Millie's dining table, the late afternoon sun casting golden beams onto the worn tabletop. Millie shared her new theory, and Donna nodded vigorously. "Yes, that's exactly the kind of thing that would spark a hush-hush group," she agreed. "Prices for those vintage trading cards can be astronomical if you find the right buyer," Penny crisply added, "and that might explain why they're so intent on storing them properly. If the cards have flaws, they lose value." Ivy twirled her straw in her glass. "So, we have a likely scenario. Percy, Walter, and Frankie are collectors, possibly dealing in high-value cards, but that still doesn't quite explain why it's so secretive. Why not just talk about it openly if it's just a hobby?" Donna shrugged. Embarrassment, maybe? Or they don't want others to know how valuable the cards are so they can buy them up at a local flea market cheaply. The group considered possible next steps. Millie bravely proposed paying Frankie a house visit under some pretense, maybe dropping off a school donation or volunteering to help with a fundraiser. Penny piped up, "I can say the library is collecting old textbooks for a sale, and I was told Miss Myers might have some books to donate. That might give us an excuse to see if we can spot anything." It was settled. 2 days later, Penny led the effort, calling Frankie and explaining that the library was gathering materials for a used book drive. Frankie, always kind-hearted, immediately agreed to help. She suggested that Penny and Millie stop by her house after dinner. That day, the pair arrived at Frankie's cozy bungalow on Lilac Lane. Heartbeats quickening, they rang the doorbell. Frankie answered, her short auburn hair framing a friendly smile. "Come on in," she said, ushering them inside. The living room was tidy, but lived in. The cat napped on a windowsill, the faint hiss of the air conditioner providing respite from the warm summer evening. Penny and Millie offered their rehearsed lines about the library's book drive, and Frankie disappeared into a back room to fetch a box of old teacher's manuals. While she was gone, Millie's eyes roamed the living room. She saw nothing suspicious. No stray gloves, no piles of old containers, no protective sleeves for cards. But then she noticed a small corner table with a dusting cloth folded neatly beside it, and a faintly chemical smell, like cleaning fluid. It was subtle, but it caught her attention. Frankie returned with a cardboard box, placing it at Penny's feet. "I'm afraid I don't have as many books as I thought, but take what you need." she said. Millie tried to steer the conversation gently toward the suspicious items. Wow, your place is spotless. You must have a foolproof cleaning routine. I need to take notes, she joked. Frankie chuckled lightly, waving a hand dismissively. I like to keep my space neat, but nothing fancy, just a habit. Penny needed to push a little further. Off the record, she said, adjusting her glasses. The library's also thinking about hosting a trading card exhibit. Apparently these are rising in popularity. Have you heard anything about that sort of collecting? Frankie faltered for just a split second, her gaze flickering away. Then she forced a smile. Can't say I have, she replied. But that momentary look spoke volumes to Millie. Something was definitely up. As they left, Penny and Millie felt more convinced they were on the right track. However, they still needed concrete proof. It wasn't enough to satisfy their curiosity. They wanted to understand whether a secret stash existed and why it was worth hiding. The answer that blossomed in Millie's mind was that there might be a single location in Daisy Dell where these collected items were stored. Some secure place away from prying eyes. After all, their purchases were frequent, but not so large as to stock each of their homes indefinitely. Could it be that the real stash was elsewhere? One morning, Ivy noted that Percy, Walter, and Frankie each came by within an hour of one another. Each purchased a similar set of cleaning items, more stamps, and a few bubble mailers. Millie and Ivy exchanged a look of determination. They hurriedly closed the store for lunch break. The boss, Mr. Rowan, was out of town, and they could manage a short closure, and decided to follow Frankie this time. She drove a small sedan, which they tailed from a careful distance. Sure enough, she headed out of the town centre, past the local park, and into an older neighbourhood dotted with abandoned buildings. At a deserted intersection, she turned sharply onto a small side road. Their pulses quickened. The road led to a dilapidated brick warehouse near the old rail line. Time had not been kind to the structure. Weeds sprang up between cracks in the pavement, and the faded sign at the entrance was half illegible. I had no idea anyone used this place, Ivy murmured, switching off the car's headlights. They parked behind a bunch of tall shrubs, peering out at Frankie's sedan. She got out and hurried through a side door, carrying her grocery bag and a small box, presumably the bubble mailers. They waited. 10 minutes later, Percy arrived in his old mustard-coloured station wagon, also ducking inside. Shortly thereafter, Walter's truck pulled up. It was the Trifecta 3, suspicious shoppers converging on one location. Now what do we do? Ivy whispered, adrenaline coursing through her. Millie, emboldened by weeks of speculation, decided they should tiptoe closer. They exited her sedan, creeping along a line of overgrown hedges. Finally, they reached a broken window covered only by a loose sheet of plywood. They carefully peered in. What they saw made Millie's breath catch. Inside the dusty warehouse was a large makeshift office space. Stacks of sealed containers lined the walls. Several large work tables stood in the center, covered in plastic sleeves, protective binders, and boxes upon boxes of trading cards, featuring vibrant images of dragons, knights, and cosmic creatures. It looked like a card dealer's paradise. Percy, Walter, and Frankie were seated at one table, meticulously wiping each card with cotton swabs, then placing it into new plastic sleeves, presumably to mail them out. A laptop perched nearby showed an auction site. They were quietly discussing how best to package the cards for maximum profit, referencing rare sets and high-value collectors from out of state. Ivy squealed softly in excitement. They're running a secret collectible card business, she whispered. That must be why they buy all that stuff. Millie nodded, enthralled. In a small-town sense, this felt huge. An entire covert operation dedicated to flipping rare trading cards. The trio probably wanted no local competition, thus the secrecy. Or maybe they were worried the local rumour mill would brand them as eccentric or greedy. In any event, the puzzle was solved. Yet, as Millie inched away from the window, a wooden plank shifted beneath her feet with a loud crack. Panic darted through her. Inside, they heard chairs screech as Percy and Walter looked up. Frankie rushed toward the window. Millie and Ivy ducked behind the bushes, hearts pounding. They heard the side door open and the crunch of gravel as footsteps approached. Holding their breaths, they stayed hidden until the footsteps receded. Clearly, the three collectors suspected someone might be snooping, but for now they weren't chasing them. Far from feeling threatened, Millie and Ivy were brimming with relief at their discovery. They tiptoed back to the car, quietly discussing what to do next. Confront them. Tell the town. Millie shook her head. It doesn't seem illegal. They're just protective of their side hustle. Maybe a large stash of old valuable cards is all it is. Ivy nodded. I guess we could let them be, but if they're that anxious, maybe it's good to let them know we're not a threat. We were just curious. As a courtesy, they decided to keep it quiet, letting the trio maintain their operation in peace. Daisy Dell was a place where folks lived and let live, after all. However, the next morning brought an unexpected development. Percy came to Maple Street Market before Millie's shift was over. He lingered by her lane, clearly uneasy. After scanning his items, Millie waited for him to speak. Finally, he mustered the words, "Hey, Millie, you see anything unusual yesterday?" Millie held his gaze. He was fidgeting, and she sensed that he knew exactly what had happened. She could have lied, but she resolved to be honest without being accusatory. "We followed you. We were worried something might be wrong. We found your warehouse. We saw the trading cards." Percy's shoulders slackened. "Look," he said quietly, leaning in. "Walter, Frankie and I are dealers. We have some high-end clients. We didn't want folks in Daisy Dell thinking we were weird or bragging about the money. But we had to keep the place secret. Those cards can go for thousands of dollars apiece if they're in mint condition." Millie offered a gentle smile. "I get it. Daisy Dell isn't exactly known for big money ventures, and people might talk. I'm sorry we snooped, but we just got worried seeing the same cleaning supplies over and over. We thought something bad was going on." Percy gave a small laugh. "Well, I can't blame you for being curious. Maybe we took secrecy a bit too far, but it's a real business. Collectors from out of state pay top dollar for these old sets. Officially, there's nothing shady about it. We're just private people." Millie placed his items in a bag. "I won't spread the word if you don't want me to, but maybe you should consider that some folks might actually applaud your little enterprise. Daisy Dell loves a good underdog story, and the idea of a secret car dealership is more interesting than anything else happening around here." Percy still appeared anxious, but nodded. "Maybe you're right. It's nice not to be hiding." He lingered a moment. "Thanks, Millie," he said softly, and exited the store. News of Daisy Dell's hidden collectible stash didn't remain entirely hidden for long. In a small town, secrets had a way of trickling out. Soon enough, the local cafe buzzed with whispers about the covert card dealers. Before they knew it, Walter, Frankie, and Percy became minor celebrities, fielding questions from folks with old shoeboxes of trading cards in their attics. Some wanted to sell, others just wanted a glimpse of something exotic. To quell the curiosity and maintain goodwill, Frankie proposed hosting a small weekend exhibit at the local community center. For 3 days, they displayed a few prized cards in protective frames, explaining their significance, rarity, and value. At first, they were skittish about showing off their stash, but the outpouring of genuine interest and support from neighbors reassured them. People from around Daisy Dell brought in old cards, excitedly asking if they were worth a fortune. Most were worthless duplicates from mass-produced sets, but every so often Walter or Percy would discover a hidden gem. Millie and Ivy came by on a Sunday afternoon to see the exhibit. The community center was buzzing with excited townsfolk, talking shop about baseball cards, card games, and rare stamps. Frankie blushed with modest pride as she displayed a particularly rare fantasy card from the early 90s. Millie had never seen her look happier. A few days after the exhibit, the dealings at the warehouse continued, but with less secrecy. The trio realized that Daisy Dell's residents weren't out to judge them or sabotage their business. In fact, they sometimes found themselves bombarded with calls from locals who'd rummaged up old binders from childhood. Daisy Dell was a town that thrived on community, and once the fear of judgment subsided, the quiet corridor of Pine Hollow Road saw an influx of curious visitors, all hoping to strike gold with a dusty old stack of cards. Through it all, Millie felt a sense of both satisfaction and camaraderie. She had unravelled a mystery, only to find that it was nothing sinister, just a modest, enterprising secret, and in the process she'd helped the dealers realize that Daisy Dell was more open-minded than they'd feared. She resumed her normal routine at Maple Street Market, greeting neighbors, scanning groceries, and taking discreet notice of changes in shopping patterns. But now there was a bit more excitement in her day-to-day, knowing that beneath the surface of her beloved hometown, unique little secrets could still blossom. Whenever Percy came through her checkout lane, he smiled appreciatively. Sometimes he'd grab a pack of gum along with his cleaning supplies, and they'd share a friendly nod and unspoken acknowledgement that what began as suspicion had led to a stronger community connection. The same went for Frankie and Walter. They no longer felt compelled to scurry out of the store with their purchase of rubber gloves and stamp sheets. Instead, they chatted for a few minutes, recounting new offers they'd received on the online site or interesting phone calls from collectors in faraway cities. All in all, Daisy Dell was still the same humble town it had always been, petunias in window boxes, chatter on porches, but a little spice had been added to the daily humdrum. For Millie, it was a reminder that sometimes those quiet rhythms of everyday life can hide the most intriguing stories. Her days continued in pleasant routine, but a curiosity about the quirks of fellow residents kept her eyes open, and who knew? Perhaps on the next unsuspecting day, she'd spot more strange purchases, clues to yet another hidden adventure in the unassuming haven of Daisy Dell.